أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء وخاتم المرسلين سيدنا ونبينا بالقاسم محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين واللعنة الدائمة على أعدائه الله من الآن إلى قيام يوم الدين. Sisters and brothers in Iman, Salamun Alaikum wa Rahmatullah. It is indeed a pleasure to be here in this conference. From what I remember, I think the last time I attended was about 10 or 12 years ago. Later on, our schedules didn't work out. But alhamdulillah, tonight I'm able to be here. Although on the way from Canada to here, there was kindly a problem, they called me in for questioning for 2 hours, which they haven't done for many, many years. I thought my name was clear, but anyway. But alhamdulillah, I'm here at the end. From what I understood from the communication that I had with the brothers from the conference, that this is going to be a workshop session. And so I'm not really prepared for a straight lecture as such. And so what I would like to do is, I would like to start with asking questions so that you can start the process and then I'll come later on. When we talk about this issue of Muslim identity in the modern world. Let us first see what are the very common bases by which the people relate to themselves and form an identity. So if we can get, maybe some young people on both sides to raise their hands and we get some answers and then we go through it. The question was, how do you identify yourself? There are some very basic foundations on which people identify themselves. And if we can get a list of that, then we can proceed and see what is the Islamic perspective on that issue. Yes, sister. The culture, okay, that comes very later on. But anyway, that's one of the... yes? Oh? Hijab would not be an identity. It would not be a manifestation of her identity, but not an identity by itself. You would not identify yourself as, a person who wears hijab. Yes? Huh? Gender. Okay, let's put it down. Yes? You. Your beliefs and practice of faith is one basis, okay? Your behavior towards Islam. So you're a Muslim? So your identity is Islam, not behavior, okay? So we go back to the issue of faith. Anything else? Yes? Where you are from. Okay, that's the beginning. When you are born, how do you relate yourself to whom? To your family. Your first identity, the first standard or level of identity starts with family. You are born in a family. And this is how you relate yourself. This is the very basic foundation of identity of human beings. But then when you grow up, gradually you come to realize that, okay, I have a family, maybe even relatives who are part of the extended family, but then the tribal identity comes in. So the family would be the very beginning, and then the tribal, identity comes in. You are Qurayshi, you are from Aus or Khazraj. I don't want to use modern names here, in case somebody is sitting here and they'll say, oh, he talks about our tribe. No. Okay? So it is very natural. You would relate to the group which has the same tribal background. The language, for example, would be the common between that tribe or that people of that qabila. And then we move further. Sometimes we identify ourselves through the regions. I am from this part of the world or from that part of the world. I am from, New York, or I am from California. So village or the town or the state becomes another level of layer of identity. Then we come to these modern concepts of the modern states. People relate themselves to a nation, especially after we have the system of passports. So you are American, you are Canadian, you are British, you are French, you are Iraqi, or you are Syrian, or you are Iranian, or Afghani, or Pakistani. And so these are all different, ways people look at themselves. And when we look at all these are all natural, way of looking at ourselves and identifying ourselves on those levels. What is the Islamic perspective about it? Islam doesn't necessarily say that these identities are to be totally suppressed and shunned. No. Because that is the reality. But then the true identity is something else. And this is where I would like to go to this ayat from Surah Hujarat, Surah number 49, ayat number 13, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Ya ayyuhan nas, inna khalaqnakum min dhakarin wa untha. That we have created you from a male and a female. On two different levels, the tafsir would be that either it refers to Adam and Eve, that's all human beings are children of Adam and Eve. And on a different level, it also means that we, came to this dunya through our father and mother. This is what I was saying, the family identity is there. It cannot be ignored. Islam doesn't ignore that. That you are part of that, so-and-so family. That is an important identity. But then you move further on. You're not only part of a family, you're part of a ethnic group or a qabila which has a language and the culture which are shared commonly by the families which are related to that tribe. And this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then says, وَجَعَلْنَاكُمْ شُعُوبًا وَقَبَائِلًا. And then we divided you. It means after creating you from Adam and Eve or from your parents, we divided you into different nations. And within the nations you have different qabila, different tribes. And so this is also in a way doing of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We do not, negate the layers of identity on the level of family, on the level of qabila, on the level of having, a group which has a common heritage. But what is the important thing? And this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَجَعَلْنَاكُمْ شُعُوبًا وَقَبَائِلًا. We divided into nations and tribes for what? لِتَعَارَفُوا. So that it becomes easy to identify one another. And this is where we are saying that those levels of, or bases of identity, whether it is the family, or the qabila and the tribe, or the ethnic group that you belong to, where you have common language and culture, or the country that you belong to, these are all fine. We are not saying that you totally, ignore that. But the point is that, Islam considers all this to be physical level of identity, where you relate yourself to the parents, to the family, to the qabila, to the ethnic group, because of the common culture and language. These are all fine, but they are not really the basis of the identity that we are looking for. When I say that Islam did not come to eliminate all these different levels of identity, let me say that when the Prophet migrated from Mecca to Medina, he found two tribes, major tribes there, Aus and Khazraj. He didn't just say, okay, from today, all of you are just Muslim, forget about this identity of being Aus and Khazraj. No, that was still maintained. But there was a higher, level of identity being imposed there, which became more common. Or for example, when we look at the city of Kufa, this is not an ancient city in a way. It was actually built during the early days of the Khilafat era. And it's interesting that the neighborhoods of Kufa were defined and established based on the different qabilas who had come from different parts of, Fars or Yemen or other areas and settled down there. That was more or less a garrison city. That is where the Muslim army would station in order to continue their conquest towards Fars. Not only that, if you look at the army of Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali bin Abi Talib alayhi salatu wasalam, in Siffin, there also some of the troops within the larger army of Amir al-Mu'mineen were divided on tribal lines. And the leaders of the Qaba'il were made, in charge of those troops within the army of Amir al-Mu'mineen. And so it's not that Islam came to totally eliminate all these identities. It's important to understand why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created us, between shu'ub and qaba'il, nations and tribes. These are not really, there's no real value in it. It's more an administrative issue. If I make it, if I can make this very simple, is, if you go to the library, especially university library where they have all bounded books, you don't have the titles on the spine, but you have a label there with the numbers and alphabets, so you have to go and find out, this is the book you're looking for, this is the number or the reference of it, and this is how you will be able to go to the floor or the area and the shelf in the library and find that book. But the label given to the book on the spine is very important to find that book, to identify that book. But it doesn't really tell you what is inside it or what is the worth of that book. And all these layers of identity that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given to us, belonging to a family, belonging to a qabila, belonging to an ethnic group where we have common language and culture, these are all fine. But these are all لِتَعَارَفُوا, so that we can easily know one another. It is no value more than that label on the spine of the book. The real worth of the book is what is inside it. And that is where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in that ayah, then he comes to this point where he says, إِنَّ أَكْرَمَكُمْ عِنْدَ اللَّهِ أَتْقَاكُمْ. The most honorable person. And this is where we come to the spiritual identity. An identity which has an everlasting value. It's not our family, affiliation. It's not the tribal affiliation. It's not the cultural or ethnic affiliation. It's not the national, affiliation. It is actually our faith in Iman. That is our true identity, which will be carried by us, not only in this dunya, but also in the akhirah. And this is where we see the difference between the other layers of identity and this identity known as, the faith-based identity, which is the true identity and the valuable identity for us. Another difference between all other layers of identity and faith-based identity is the issue of Jabr. We didn't choose which family will be our family, which part of the world will be born, which qabila will we belong to. No, this is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He made this choice. We didn't have a choice there. But when it comes to faith, this is something where we have to build that identity by ourselves, by accepting the faith and practicing that, and reaching to the level where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives you the karama, the honor, and the respect. Not because of your color or your language or your family ties or tribal identity. And this is something we have to keep all the time in our minds. But let me go back to the issue of modern situation that we have in US. If I may ask you another question here, when we look at the Shia community, and especially dealing with the Shia community in North America, how do these community identify themselves? Do they only identify themselves on the basis of the deen and the madhab, on the faith? Or there are some other layers of identity that they have as a Shia community in North America? Huh? So we're talking about the tribal or the cultural or ethnic affiliation. We see different Shia centers and Marakis in Canada and US. Some of them are run and based by the people from Indian, Pakistani background. You have Marakis of the Afghani brothers and sisters. You have centers which belong to the Lebanese Shia community. There are some centers which belong to the Iranian Shia community. You have Iraqi brothers also have their own centers. Although the names do not always identify those centers on tribal, lines, but on reality, that is what's going on. And what I would like to say is that I'm not saying that is wrong. When you talk about the process of hijrah and migration, this happens. You have people who have come from, let's say, Afghanistan because of the situation there of the Taliban. People who have come from Iraq in very large numbers during the days of Saddam and between the two wars during his time. And they don't know the language of this land. So for them to maintain their faith, they have to do things in their own language. And so when we have these multiple ethnic-based Shia centers, I'm not saying this identity is wrong. That is actually something which happens when you have new immigrants coming to a new part of the world. The only thing is that you can have your Irani center, you can have your Lebanese center, you can have your Iraqi center, you can have your Pakistani center, you can have your Irani center, but your minds and hearts should be open to accept anyone who is of the same deen and mazhab from coming in and participating. This is the main challenge. That other levels of identity has to be, on a lower level. The main sense of identity has to be on the basis of our faith, our deen and madhab. As long as we are spiritually and mentally open for that, that diversity of the Shia community will be there. Until the time will come when you will see, probably not our children, but our grandchildren, great-grandchildren, they might be from any ethnic background, but then they will be more what you call American than Lebanese, more American than Pakistani, more American than Iraqi. They will be speaking the common language. And that's where you will see kind of a merging of a Shia community in North America with a common language and common culture. This is going to happen in the future. We can facilitate that, make it easy, but remember, we cannot force it, and it cannot be done, overnight. And so this is where we have to realize that there are different layers of identity. We cannot suppress other layers, totally, but at the end, we always have to see our deen and madhab is the main basis of our identity. Because that is what defines us, and that is what will be the basis of success of the community in this part of the world.